Hello and welcome to another episode of Chasing Excellence. Every week on the show, we dedicate some time to exploring how we can live a life of better health and increased fulfillment. We answer your questions about the 5 factors of health, dive deep on living a life of excellence, and explore the strategies and frameworks to help us chase what truly matters. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning into the show. My name is Patrick Cummings. I am here by myself for a very quick introduction to the episode. This week, we have for you Book Club number 1. Ben and I finally got together and talked about Book Club number 1, which is something we launched in the premium membership a couple months ago. Got a little delayed, a little waylaid, but we got to it eventually. Book Club number 1, the choice was Patrick Lencioni's The Ideal Team Player, which talks about the 3 virtues of a great or an ideal team player: humility, hunger, and people smarts. Ben and I talked about the 3 big things that I pulled out of this book, which is how do we think about humility and hunger and people smarts outside of the context of work. It's one of the big things we wanted to explore in this book club. The second thing is the role that insecurity plays in and how and wherever we are weakest or when we are weak across hunger, humility, and people smarts. And the third thing is something that I started to think about as healthy hunger, which is in the work context, bringing it back to work. How do we make sure that we are hungry and all the benefits of being a hungry team player without it leading to burnout and overwhelm and us not doing a particularly good job of whatever it is we are there to do. The first 2 of those bullet points: how do we bring it out of the office and into the real world, and the role that insecurity plays, is what you will hear or watch in this here episode. If you would like that third bullet point, if you would like to hear us continue to talk about the role of healthy hunger, well, you'll have to jump into the premium membership, which you can get www.chasingexcellence.email. You can get this entire episode ad-free, as well as a bunch of other cool things like the challenge we just started, the conversations that we're having there, and a bunch of fun things that we've got in the future. The link is in the show notes, but again, www.chasingexcellence.email. So without further ado, here is Ben and I in Book Club number 1, chatting about Patrick Lencioni's The Ideal Team Player. Have you ever been part of a real book club? One that you would consider a book club, and not one that you do with team members at CFNA?
The only thing I've ever done book club fashion is with the team that I have, having them read and we share, which is a book club.
Exactly, which is, and ironically or not,
without the wine.
Ironically or not, the book we chose is one that you do with at least coaches there at CFNE. I don't know if you do it with the CompTrain team. So the first book in our book club is Patrick Lencioni's The Ideal Team Player. I would love maybe just kick it off with why, of all the books we could have chosen, and you and I talk about lots of books all the time, why did we pick this one? Why did you want to dive into this one in particular, especially for Chasing Excellence, which isn't specifically work team related, but I think we're going to try to bring it into that.
Okay, so the really honest answer to that is we're doing this book club review with our team right now. And
awesome.
And I wanted to read 1 book instead of 2 and I knew we were going to do this, so let's line it up. But the second part of this is a little more maybe multifaceted. The first is the overall message of the book, which is how to be the character traits required to be an ideal team player. So why is being an ideal team player important on a team? That's pretty obvious. Whether that's a sports team or a business team, I believe that, it's kind of written into what we're trying to do. Is our biggest kind of overarching goal, if you want to call it that, you can call it other things, is to build a really great team. I think if you build a really great team, I stole this from another book that we might read later on, but Setting the Table by Danny Myers, the restaurateur. He kind of flipped things upside down. Everything was always about, customer centric, put the customer at the center of everything. And his approach, which I really leaned into and I resonated with, was that's all well and good, but if you don't put the team first, you're probably not going to be able to make the customer first, because you're not going to have really invested, passionate, talented team members, ... that work well together as a team. And what he said was order of priorities should actually, it's kind of weird they were doing a book club starting off talking about a different book, But what Danny actually said is he gave a priority list that I really tugged at what was meaningful to me, and it was team first, customers customers second. I kept on saying centric, and that was hard to say after that. It goes team, customers, community, partners, then profits. And that's what the idea behind that is. If you take care, it's like a flywheel, right?
Yep.
If you take care of your team, then you will then be able to take care of your customers. If you are able to take care, and so on and so on and so on. So that's where I really believe that taking care, creating a really strong team, it's not just taking care of, but creating a really strong team, hiring the right people, getting the right people on the bus, putting them in the right seats, getting them to work together, is the thing that we want to do. Plus, we talk about this all the time on this podcast. I don't want work to be this other thing that I got to go and need to do. And if I don't really enjoy working with a high-performing, well-functioning team, that's what work's going to be. And I don't want the drama. I don't want the gossip. I don't want the headache of micromanaging low performers. I don't want the walking on eggshells around people or having people on the team that aren't, quote, people smart. So I think to have a great team, it starts with getting ideal team players. And that's the first reason we chose this book. The second part is, okay, so what does that mean for people not on a team, not in sports? We are all teammates in this thing called humanity. And that's really what, if you're an ideal teammate, I think it's one of those, I don't like the saying, it's like how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yep. Yeah.
But in this sense, it is, if you are a great teammate on a team, my sense is you're going to be a great teammate on any team because it's built upon these three core character traits. Now, I do believe the second one, hunger, and we'll get into the specifics, I believe, is modal specific. So because you're hungry to be a great dad doesn't mean you be hungry to be a great accountant or a great factory line worker. It's just very, very... But besides that, I think that the character traits carry across, and we all should be striving to be ideal teammates in this big team that we call humanity. And then the third one is, for people that did read it or are planning to read it, it's such an easy read. Like it's what Lencioni is amazing at, is taking these relatively challenging things to teach, like how do you get a team to function better, and distilling it into these nice, a story, a parable, a fable. And it makes it incredibly, it's big type, it's a page turner, it's a story. We resonate with stories. The more scientific backing stuff comes in the back half of the book. If you only read the parable, you'll still get 85% of what you need to get out of it. So I also always start these book clubs a lot of times with this one or something very similar to this, just for the fact that, like, we've talked about this before with, teaching your kid how to play soccer. You need some quick wins.
Yep.
You got to get just like, oh, I could do, this isn't that hard. I could do this. I just read a book in a weekend. Like, oh my gosh, that's kind of cool. People get into it rather than starting with Principles by Ray Dalio, right?
Yeah. Or even something like 7 Habits, which is like
it's so dense, right?
Yeah,
so
it's like it's
so dense. Yeah. So if we are to read some of those things, we do it kind of like chapter by chapter, where this one we can do the book. So that's why we start with this one. Yeah.
Amazing. So I'm going to have this conversation, or we're going to have this conversation with the assumption that folks have read it, only because otherwise it becomes a book review and not kind of a book club thing. But really, really high level, the book, the fable, is focusing on 3 of these kind of primary team virtues of humility, hunger, and smarts. So that's really, like, for the sake of our conversation, that's really all you have to really understand, is he's trying to make the case that these are the 3 markers of an individual who make a good teammate. And the book was obviously written with business and leadership in mind. I think we're going to dip into that, but try to stay maybe outside of the world of business as best we can. So what I want to do, or what I'm looking forward to doing here, is I've got kind of three big things that kept sticking out at me, or that I kept thinking about as I read this book. And I want to kind of just go through each one of these three and explore where we can explore. And the three things are, you alluded to this already, which is humble, hungry, smart, outside of the office, outside of the work context. That's number one. The second thing is I really want to dive into insecurity, because one of the things that Lencioni says in the book is that insecurity is often the core source of a lack of humility. And I'm really curious to chat through that a little bit, because I think that insecurity is actually at the core of when we lack hunger and when we lack people smarts. I think there's something really interesting in exploring that idea. And then the third thing I want to talk about is hunger, but something I've started to think about is healthy hunger. How can we be hungry? And this might bring us back into the workplace, because this is where I think about it. But how can we be hungry without sacrificing the balance that you and I talk about all the time, without being the person who says yes to everything and ultimately ends up burned out and not doing a particularly good job because they said yes to everything because they thought that's what hunger meant. And so I kind of want to break down a little bit of what it could look like to be hungry, but to do it in a way that's healthy and that allows us to maintain the balance that we always talk about, we prescribe. And so the first thing first, humble, hungry, smart, outside of the office, outside of work. I just want to bring one quote in, and it's a theme that runs through the book, which is the magic here is, and this is a quote, the magic here is just that if even one of the qualities of humility, hunger, or smarts is missing in a big way, you've got yourself a jackass. This is sort of the word they use, or he uses in the book, the characters do, to indicate anybody who doesn't have one of these three things, these three virtues, in sufficient amount. And so just using that as the springboard, I'd love your thoughts on humility, hunger, smarts. When you say like we're all part of this one big team, which I agree with, where does humility, hunger, and smarts, where does having those things, focusing on those things, make us better community members, better friends, better partners, better parents, etc.?
Yeah, so it's a big question. So starting off with a little bit of the, if you're lacking one of these in a major way, it essentially makes you a jackass. And if you start to, there's a lot of companies. I think Nike was one of the first ones. I know Noble has this in one of theirs, which is this like no jackasses, no a-holes, like that whole thing. Like what they're trying to say is that character matters is essentially what they're saying. I think that if we leave it at that, it really becomes hard to define what a jackass or an a-hole is. And this is what this humble, hungry, smart is the formulaic breakdown of how you can assess whether somebody is one of those things or not. So then you just have to go, okay, now that we know that, what are the defining characteristics of humility? How does hunger represent itself? What does that look like? And what does smarts look like? And once you understand what those things are, then you can start to, that is why that person isn't, feels like a little bit of a square peg in a round hole. That's why they're not quite jiving with the rest of the team. Otherwise, you just kind of go like, is he an a-hole? And like, no, he gets along really well with people. But then in the book, they label that, there's the politician, and there's the, there's a lot of different personality types that they kind of label into these different varying degrees of you're missing this one, but you have this is showing up in a little bit, but this is missing in a big way. So I think that if you understand this conceptual framework of humble, hungry, smart are the necessary, potentially and exclusively only, like this is like everything might be able to fit inside of those three pillars to define whether somebody is a strong teammate or not. And I think before we go into any more of the conversation, I know people have probably read this. That's why it's a book club, but I think we just get on the same page. It's like, hey, this is, when we say humility, it's not, it's not meekness. It's not shyness. It's not thinking less of yourself. In a lot of ways, it's the opposite of that. We said is like lack of humility, as you said, is probably the root cause of that more than anything else, is insecurity. So in fact, it's the opposite of insecurity. It's the bravery to be able to say, like, I don't know the answer to that. That's really interesting. Instead of like pretending you know the answer, it's going like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Humility is really associated with vulnerability. Vulnerability forever has been looked upon as a weakness until Brene Brown brought it to become really popular. And it's like, oh my gosh, only the strongest, bravest, and most courageous of us all are willing to expose their vulnerability. It also goes so well in line with, and I'm just pulling book after book, but Carol Dweck's mindset. Humility is so tangential. It's almost the exact same thing as a growth mindset. Like I am humble enough to know I don't have all the answers. I don't see things as pass fail. If I'm not good at this, it doesn't mean I'm not going to be good in the future. I'm willing to expose my weaknesses. I want to learn. Like it's this idea of not thinking of your less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. It's about being, it's not about me, it's about we. It's about defining success in terms of the team and not you. So we've had lots of discussion about this on our team because we read this book every few years. And one of my favorites that I've seen pop up over and over and over again, and man, if I was to lead an athletic team, we just got done watching March Madness stuff. You watch some of those coaches. What I would want is someone on my team that would, if I said, hey guys, against this team next Thursday, I've scouted them, we're going to play zone. I would want the player that goes, coach, I don't think we should do that. I go, great. I'm like, tell me why. And he tells me why. I go, that's a really interesting perspective. I don't agree with that. We're going to play zone. What I would want from that player is for them to play with their same amount of vigor, intensity, care, emotion, even though they didn't get their way. And I know this is, again, like noble, like they have a cool saying, which is everyone gets a say, not everyone gets a vote. Mm-hmm. That requires a level of humility. Like I want to be able to have the bravery and courage to share my opinion, but if I don't get my way, I don't go and pout about it. I don't go and try to create little mutinies and little circles like, can you believe it? Coach is playing it his way. And even though I said it this way and I know, don't you think we should be playing it this way? That's not an ideal team player. We need the people that are going to go like, yep, it's about the betterment of the team. And even though I didn't get my way, there's a really great example I came across of this. I'm going to get the actual specifics wrong, but let's say it was the potato farmers. It's some sort of like agricultural, right? Whether it was wheat, potatoes, corn, soy, doesn't really matter. But in the United States, there's this governing body that all of these people are a part of, essentially like a union. And they get together and they're like, again, I'm going to mess up the specifics of it. But it's not about the letters, it's about the spirit of this. They get together and have this vote of whether they should essentially merge together and sell together, basically like one price, everyone got this thing, or they should stay independent. And the vote came down to 49.9% to 50.1%. So it came down to like, out of the thousands of people, it came down to like a vote or two. And what was amazing was after that vote, everyone went back and were on the same page in the new direction and were better producers than they were before. That's so cool. Like, yeah, I didn't get my way, but think about the politics in America right now. Like if your candidate doesn't get elected, we don't go, hey, we're Americans, we're in this thing together, let's do everything we can to support, not blindly support. As I said, let's challenge. Coach should be challenged. But when you don't get your way, you don't go in the corner and pout. That's not humility. And these farmers totally did that, and they got together, even though almost half of them didn't get their way, those half went back and became just as productive, if not more productive, members of their group than they were before. That's humility. That's awesome. Love that. So that's where it's like, it's not just about in the business setting of the team. It's about us as people that vote for political candidates. It's about us in our school systems. Like, things might not go our way. When they don't, we don't get panties in a bunch. We still go, hey, I'm a member of this team, and the success of the team is what matters. Not that I get my way. It goes back to like victim mindset a little bit. It's like the victim goes, I didn't get my way, so I'm not going to play ball. I'm going to sit on the bench and complain about why I'm not getting the playing time. The other parts of that is we can just kind of layer in that it becomes a little bit more obvious where these other parts come in terms of hunger and obviously people smarts. Like, and when we say smarts, people that have read it, we know that that's what we're referring to as emotional intelligence, ability to communicate, being able to read people, emotional maturity, being a really strong communicator one-on-one in a group, being a great listener, hearing people out. Like, it's to me, it's like, this book shouldn't even be about business at all. This book doesn't need to be about athletics at all. Like, this is about being productive members of a society. Like, we can take any one of these things and go, here's how it applies. But again, it's if you have a glaring deficiency in any of the one, it's a real cause for concern.
We will be back with more of this conversation in just a moment. But first, I want to say thanks to a few sponsors. We're brought to you this week by a brand new sponsor, Lumen. I'd like to introduce you to Lumen, the world's first handheld metabolic coach. Learn more by pointing your internet machines to lumen.me and make sure you use the code excellence to get $100 off your Lumen. What the heck do you do with it once you get it? Well, just imagine. All you've got to do is breathe into this brilliant little device every single morning, and you can get personalized nutrition advice for the day. You'll know if you're burning fat or carbs, and you'll even be able to check how your body responds to workouts and meals. So why should you care about metabolic health? Well, your metabolism is pretty much your body's engine. It turns food you eat into fuel, and of course, that fuel keeps you going. Optimal metabolic health can translate to easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and even better sleep. The best part, Lumen helps you understand something called metabolic flexibility, which is your body's ability to efficiently switch between using different fuel sources like carbs and fats. If you're ready to take the next step in improving your health, check out lumen.me. Use the code excellence to get $100 off your Lumen. That's LUMEN.me. And use the code excellence at checkout for $100 off your new Lumen. We are also brought to you this week by OneSkin. We love us some OneSkin. They're an amazing brand that's revolutionizing the skincare industry. Learn more at oneskin.co and make sure you use the code excellence for 15% off your first purchase. OneSkin isn't like the stuff you can get at your local CVS. It's the world's first skin longevity company. They focus on the cellular aspects of aging to keep your skin looking and acting younger for longer. Their products are scientifically validated to improve your skin's health while targeting the root cause of aging. I've been using their products for a while now, and I love it. OneSkin has a unique ingredient called OS01 peptide, which has been proven to turn off the aging cells that cause wrinkles, lines, and thinning skin. They have got tons of studies to back up their claims, plus they've got over 4,000 five-star reviews, and were recently recognized by Fast Company as one of the most innovative brands of 2024. So why not give OneSkin a try? Right now, you can get an exclusive 15% off your first OneSkin purchase by using the code excellence when you check out at oneskin.co, 15% off at oneskin.co. with the code excellence. And after you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Make sure to tell them that we sent you. Here's to healthier, younger looking skin with OneSkin. I started jotting down some notes about okay, well, what is the opposite of hunger? What is the opposite of humility? What is the opposite of people smarts? And I kept, you can come up with 100 different synonyms for these things, but I kept coming back to, the opposite of this idea is selfishness. The opposite of this idea is it's about me, and my energy is pointed back at me and not outwards. My humility doesn't exist because it's about me. It's not about you. It's not, my hunger doesn't exist because it's about me. It's not about you. But as soon as we talked about this recently in an episode, we were answering a question about a CrossFit gym coach in a CrossFit gym. And we were talking about, as soon as you start to realize that it's not about you, it's about them, is when you can actually start to make the progress you say you want, that you can actually start to become the leader that you say you want to be. And I think that that's really important to recognize, is that the opposite of humility and hunger and people smarts, at least in this context, is selfishness. It's thinking too much of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what a destructive character trait, right? Especially if what we're, you kind of can't, people that listen to this show just definitely understand the perspective that we're trying to take, which is like, keep zooming out, right? And when you have it as a magnifying glass or a microscope, it's all about you.
Yep.
And then you zoom out a little bit and you go, okay, it's not just about me. It's about my spouse and my family. And you zoom out a little bit more, and it's like, okay, maybe it's also about, my coworkers and, people on my immediate team. And you zoom out a little more, and it's like, well, it's also about my neighbors and my community. You zoom out a little bit more, like, yeah, like if you zoom out enough, it's like what we want to do is just be great teammates for everybody. And the opposite of that is like this individual focus, which is what's in it for me. How can I get, we all are, and we should be, and we're all the stars of our own movie. And I don't think it's not wrong to navigate life that way, because it's the reality. It is the thing. You are the star of your movie, and everyone else is supporting actors or extras. But that's the case for everybody. If you're going to be a supporting cast or an extra in somebody else's movie, what role are you playing? Like, who are you in their movie? That's a different perspective to bring to things. If you watch movies, there's always these like amazing extra characters that are like awesome and people love and get along with everybody and make people better. And a lot of times they're the ones that teach the lessons to the star. But then there can be the villains, and there's gonna be the people that create hurdles and obstacles for other people. Let's not be those people. And the way we do that is by zooming out a little bit. So I totally agree. And you could do the antidote thing the opposite for, antidote isn't the right word. The opposite for each of those words as well. And it's a powerful experiment, exercise as well.
Yeah. Thinking about this as outside of the workplace, I kept thinking about, like, and you teed us up with it the first time we mentioned this book, was like, team human, I think is what you said. And I was thinking about that. And I think the interesting thing about that is recognizing a couple things. One is that what we're talking about is culture. What we're talking about is the way we do things around here. And when you think about these three virtues in current culture, it seems like this is countercultural in a really interesting way. Because if we say the opposite, at least you can make the case, the opposite of humility, hunger, and people smarts is selfishness, you can make the case that that's the culture we live in now. We live in a very selfish culture. And so to say we're team human and we're team HHS, it means to say we're going in the opposite direction. And I think that's really interesting. And I think that that's important to recognize. And by culture, I mean all of us, but it's also the culture of your house. It's also the culture of your relationship with your significant other. It's the culture of your friend group. It's all of these things. The culture really boils down to, and this is a Seth Godin thing, is the phrase, "This is what we do around here." And when we recognize that we have power to influence culture, is when we take the ownership back from what often is the case, where it feels like everybody's crazy, everybody's selfish, everybody's focused on themselves. And we recognize that, we actually have both the responsibility and the power to affect culture. And it's done through this recognition of, in this case, humility and hunger and people smarts, or the opposite, going in the opposite direction of selfishness. And I think when we talk about the victim mentality, that's the opposite of it. It's the ability to recognize, where do I have my hands on the levers, even if those levers are very, very small, even if I can influence only 5 people. When you're on a small team, as you've been, as I've been, as lots of us have been on, we recognize, like, if one, like, I was just thinking about this, not that this is the case at CrossFit New England, but let's just say there's 5 coaches and you hire a new coach, and that new coach comes on. We don't need to worry about how that individual got there, but they're selfish. They're not hungry. They complain about things. One person on a team of 5 or 6 can drag that culture backwards. But just as likely, if that same individual enters that team, the culture can drag the individual away from those things. And so we have so much power when we recognize it and when we take the responsibility for it to move away from selfishness and towards these things, hunger and humility. And when we do that, we pull culture with us.
Yeah, dude. That's great. There's a lot in there. What makes you think that we live in a culture of selfishness now?
I think that if you recognize that one part of selfishness is an inability to hear opposing viewpoints, because it is uncomfortable and because it is far easier to surround yourself with people who agree with you. And when you look at what we celebrate in this culture, we celebrate what? Followers and money and fame and accolades and external validations, which are in their own way acts of selfishness. I think I don't know that I would say fully that we are in a selfish culture, but I think the argument could be made that there is a very heavy move towards me first.
Yeah. It's scary. Yeah. I think that what we celebrate, in terms of fame, wealth, accumulation, I don't think it's new. That seems like the kings and, everybody wanted to be wealthier and all that stuff. But there is this, it does seemingly seem to get magnified, exemplified with this, particularly the likes and the look at me thing, which is a very strange, we talk about this all the time, but, we probably talk about equally as much off this show as we do on it. Like the social platform things, it's just so obscure. It's so strange to me. And I think that you're right. I think it is a selfish thing. But I think a part of it too is it's not just that it's totally self-centered in like I like looking at myself in the mirror type thing, like that, but it's this weird new opportunity that people don't know how to handle well. It's kind of like the gold rush back in, way back when, hey, there is this way that you could go and become rich and famous. It doesn't take a lot of effort. You just got to go there and put your pan in the water for a little bit and sift through this thing. And the next thing you know, you have a nugget of gold. And it's kind of like, I think that's where we're kind of being sold with this social media thing. Like, hey, if you just put a little bit of effort in this thing and you bring up your followers, and I know that you're at 1,500 now, but if you get to 15,000 and it's not much harder to do it, here's how you do it. You'll be able to kind of like support your lifestyle of traveling around the world. And people go like, oh my God, like I could do that. And so then everyone's going for the likes. I think it's, and I could be mistaken. Maybe it's I think that we're just being sold a bad bag of goods a little bit. I don't think it's all done for, the way we've been told, which is the dopamine effect of like likes feel good. So I'm going to go for more likes. I think it's that maybe it's just my entrepreneurial mindset and how like turned off I am and how uninterested I am in likes, that this is my, the way I justify the interest in it is that everyone thinks they're going to be the next Mr. Beast or Logan Paul or whoever those next, Kardashian, is because those people have done it. Those people have become billionaires through social platforms in seemingly really quick, easy ways. And I can do that too. I do like your, this idea of a couple things, which is like we need to focus back on, it's not about like necessarily I can't influence the world, so I'm not going to play a part. This, there's so many, I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt that said, never underestimate the power of a small, passionate group of people's ability to change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. Mm-hmm. That I really lean into that as a lot. And you know me, like I'm not out to go and change the world. I'm out to change the people that raise their hand and go like, hey, I'd like to be a part of your little circle. And once you say that, like, come on in, you're part of the tribe. And that's who I want to like take care of and, do unselfish things for. Mm-hmm. It goes the other way is like think globally, act locally. It's like a bumper sticker that you see. It's that same thing. It's like, let's focus on ourselves, but not in terms of what's in it for me, but how can I be the change I want to see in the world? And I think that it starts with, if you're talking about, it all starts with selfishness. There's an example that we use all the time, like, if not me, then who? And are you going to be the type of person that picks up the trash? Like, mm-hmm. do you walk over it, or are you the type of person that picks up the trash? And, we give a lot of times, I used to give this in my business seminar about like what integrity meant, which was doing the right thing regardless. And the example I give, it doesn't matter how small it is like you go grocery shopping, you wheel your cart out to your car, you load up your car, and are you the type of person, like it's, as you said, Seth Godin's like, it's the way we do things around here. Are you the type of person that the way you do things around here is you walk the shopping cart back to the corral? And I think that unselfish people, humble people, good ideal team players, they ask themselves a question a lot, which is, what's the easy way and what's the right way? Selfish people take the easy way. Ideal team players take the right way. What's the, I said we should be playing man-to-man. Coach said we should be playing zone. What's the easy thing to do there? Bitch, moan, pout, don't give your full effort to prove that the coach was wrong in his decision because we lost because you didn't give your full effort. What's the right way? Even though you didn't get it to go your way, you still give full effort. That's very unselfish. It's very hard, but it's also the right decision for you, for the team, and everybody else.
We shall continue this conversation momentarily, but first, a few words of thanks from a couple sponsors. We're brought to you this week by Cozy Earth. As human beings who are all about health and fitness, you and I understand how crucial good sleep is for our well-being. And let me tell you, Cozy Earth's bedding has been a lovely addition to my sleep routine as of late. If you want to get some for yourself, go to CozyEarth.com, use the code EXCELLENCE for 35% off. These products are not just soft, they're soft as a mother's touch, unless your mother's really mean, in which case that analogy completely falls apart. Regardless, their sheets regulate temperature and adapt to your body's needs, which is a huge plus for anyone like me who tends to get hot at night. Remember, quality sleep isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. You owe it to yourself. So do yourself a favor, check out CozyEarth.com, use the code EXCELLENCE for a whopping 35% off. Trust me, this is an investment worth making. Don't forget to use the code EXCELLENCE at CozyEarth.com for that 35% off discount. You're not just buying bedding, you're investing in better sleep and ultimately better health. So go on, treat yourself to Cozy Earth bedding. You deserve it. Oh, Mother's Day is coming up soon. Did you forget? Because you bad person if you did. Can you think of a better gift than some super comfortable sheets or sleepwear? I certainly can't. CozyEarth.com. We're also brought to you this week by Shopify. Are you selling something? Do you use the internet to do so? If you answered yes to both of those questions, well, you probably need some Shopify. in your life. Go to shopify.com/excellence to learn more about the global commerce platform that exists to help you at every stage of your business, and get yourself a $1 per month trial when you sign up. You may not have heard of Shopify before. Well, you probably have because you're not living under a rock, but let's go with it. You may not have heard of Shopify before, but you definitely have used it. Some of the biggest brands in the world use Shopify to reach customers and grow their businesses. Allbirds, Rothy's, and Noble all use Shopify, just to name 3 very random ones that I chose. And you possibly, whether you're selling coaching services, your homemade protein bars, or graphic tees, Shopify's tools, apps, and services make it easy to get started and easy to grow. It's got the internet's best converting checkout, up to 36% better compared to other leading commerce platforms that we shall not name. Plus, it's got an AI-powered all-star called Shopify Magic to help you sell more with less effort. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/excellence. That's shopify.com/excellence to level up your business today. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to my second bullet point, all about insecurity. I just want to read the quote from the book that kind of made me flag this. It says, "The source of a lack of humility is always related in some way to insecurity. And for most people, insecurity is rooted in childhood and family issues that go way back beyond their first day on the job or team." And so I happen to, like, I think this is very true. I think a lot of when I think about myself in times and scenarios where I was maybe not as humble as I could have been, or even not as hungry as I should have been, or not as people smart as almost all of it always comes back down to my own insecurity. And I think I think it's so worth recognizing how much our insecurities, however one might define them, or the source of them, to the quote's point there, we've got to be able to recognize them in order to recognize where and how we could be more humble, or more hungry, or more people smarts, or more curious, or less judgmental. So much of it comes down to something at the core of us that either we've recognized, or we haven't, or we've dealt with, or probably not, that is keeping us from the kind of progress that, certainly if you're listening to this, you're at least putting your hand up and saying, I'm interested in progress. I'm interested in getting better. I'm interested in being more humble and hungry and people smart. We've got to figure out what is the thing at the core, what is the nugget at the core that time and time again, in the way that it does, stops us in our tracks.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that in the quote in the book, he's referring to that in terms of humility. It's like it's the showstopper for humility, right?
Yep.
But as you said, I think it's the showstopper for all of them. Like, as we just said, and you said really well, is I think it comes down rooting to like judgment, mostly like personal judgment or quickness to judge others. And then a lack of curiosity. This goes back again to the growth mindset. This is the differentiator between a growth mindset. See, I'm just not good at that. Like judgment, insecurity, all of that, as opposed to like willingness to be vulnerable. Vulnerable people are not insecure. Like that's just, it's the opposite of that. I'm secure enough that I'm willing to share with you my vulnerable points. Like that's, it comes down to like this old warrior thing. Like I'm so confident in my ability to beat you that I'm going to show you where the little weak spots are in my armor. Like this is where I'm vulnerable right here. Like if you stab me right here, there's no armor. That's vulnerability. But I'm so confident in who I am that I'm willing to expose that. That's the difference between vulnerability, confidence, and how this thing ties together a little bit. But I can't stop that at humility. Like if you're insecure, I know, I'm a coach. Like I'm a athletic performance. I try to get people to be the very best in the world. When someone's insecure with something, they don't want to train it. They don't get better. This was Katrin with the rope climbs. Her worst movement in the space was rope climbs. So because she was insecure about it, she didn't like to expose how bad she was at it. In the gym, she didn't like to work on it because look how I'm supposed to be a games athlete. And half the people in class can climb ropes better than I can. That's really vulnerable place. And she was insecure about it. So until we worked on the character components of insecurity, and you have to bust through that in certain creative ways, there was no way to work on it. And if that's the case, that's the lack of hunger. Work. She wouldn't work on it because of her insecurities. It's the same thing if somebody's like really insecure about speaking in front of people, like really insecure. They're gonna put their efforts into avoidance, not to into betterment. And then if any of these three were going to be influenced by insecurity, I actually think it's the people smart one the most, right? Like by far. Like if you're insecure, like you were as a kid, and I was as a kid, you just choose not to communicate. You just choose not to talk, and you're quiet, and that's what that's rooted in. Shyness is rooted in insecurity. And I can say that because I was an incredibly shy kid. So I know that from my own personal experiences. I know that from reading about it because I was curious about it and like, what is that? Is the case for that? So if there's anything that's going to keep us from being a good, strong communicator, being the ideal team player, I think insecurity, as you said, like let's root the thing. Well, when you start peeling it back and you start digging down, I think the roots of a lot of this, probably not all, but a lot of this is going to tie back to some levels of insecurity.
And one of the things I think about with that is when you are insecure, at least when you act in deference to your insecurity, when you aren't as hungry as you could be, when you're not as humble, when you're not as people smart, because of that barrier, what you end up losing, and this is to the Catherine story, is you end up losing feedback. You end up losing feedback. And if we don't get feedback, whether it's how to climb a rope better, whether it's how to do our job better, whether it's how to communicate our significant other better, if we're not able to ever get ourselves to a place where we are receiving feedback, we cannot get better. And then we are in the sort of the doom loop of the same situation happening over and over and over again. And we don't get the feedback we need, and we don't sit with that feedback long enough, and we don't act in response to that feedback. And so we just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And then we wonder why we're exactly where we were 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's because we're not able, if we let our insecurities win, we're not able to get the feedback we need. And I think that that's a big part of or the challenge of hunger and humble and humility and people smarts is we've got to be willing to be vulnerable, to be brave enough, to be uncomfortable enough to actually learn something about ourselves.
It's a really good way to tie back to what we internally define as the number one defining characteristic of humility, which is an eagerness for and ability to embrace feedback. Because if you are insecure, you don't want feedback, because what you're hearing is more and more, you already don't feel good about something, and you hear the feedback as somebody sledgehammering you into the ground.
Yep.
As opposed to what it is supposed to be being, which is molding and building you, because that's what feedback is. When I start working with a new coach, and we have a new coach that started with us this week, so it's very poignant. The first conversation I have with them is, I'm going to give you this feedback, and I'm going to continue to give you a lot of feedback. When I do, I want you to hear, Ben thinks I'm a good coach, and this is why he's investing into me. If I stop giving you feedback, I don't want you to hear or think, Ben thinks I'm a good coach. If I stop giving you feedback, I want you to hear, something's up. Ben doesn't care enough to invest into me right now. And that's just, I want to make sure that people understand what the purpose of feedback is and how they should be internalizing it. And if you are insecure, to your point, it's going to blunt the feedback loop. And if we're all here to try to grow, evolve, and quote, chase excellence, it's the fastest way to get from point A to the proverbial point B, which is excellence, is to get feedback along the way. Imagine, I kind of liked this. I learned about this a long time ago. Imagine you're trying to become a better basketball player, and you're standing on the free throw line, taking free throw shots just from practice. And after you let go of the ball and take a shot, after the ball goes about 5-6 feet away from your face, about halfway to the hoop, a big curtain comes up. And you're now, all you see is the curtain. You don't know if the ball went in, you don't know if the ball rimmed out, you know if the ball was an air ball, and then it drops down, you take another shot. Without the feedback, the visual feedback of what went right, what went wrong, you cannot improve as a basketball player. It's only through the feedback of, was that one right? Was that one wrong? What should I do to improve? And we do this so well, almost all animals do, subconsciously. We can just do it. We don't have to even process it. We don't have to go, okay, that was because the ball went, just smashed off the backboard and never hit the rim. That means I threw it too hard. You don't even have to do that part. Your body can process that really well. But this also goes into I'm a geek for, if there's one thing I really like on social media, it's watching other coaches coach. And this is where you can see what a coach could do. So not only do you get your own feedback, but a coach goes, hey, when you do that, follow through with your fingertips. You're just pushing the thing off your palms. Put your fingertips in the basket. And now you get this other piece of feedback that you might not have been able to do from the other one of it smashed off the backboard and bounced back. Now you get this other thing of, ooh, that might have taken a really long time or may never have happened. That's the speed track. That is just the accelerator to growth. So this idea that we fear feedback is, to your point, is completely rooted in insecurity. And that's why it's so refreshing to be around people that don't fear feedback. Nick Saban has this saying, which is, and he says it to all of his teams when they first started, beginning of every season. He's like, the okay players that are here don't want to be coached. They don't want it. They don't want to be told what they're doing wrong. The good players accept feedback. They're ready for it. They'll take it. The great players, the great ones among us, are going to go and seek it out. They're going to, coach, did I do that right? Coach, what could I have done better? Coach, how was my practice today? That's what's going to make people great. And again, we're trying to be the ideal. We could circle back to what this whole thing's about. If we want to be the ideal team player, insecurity is going to crush us. Now, I don't have all of the tools to work through insecurity. I just don't. But if we just kind of think about these few things, am I doing this the easy way or the right way? Am I being selfish? Am I not accepting feedback because of my own insecurity? We just start asking ourselves questions. And it goes right to where you let off this whole thing is can we just be curious? Or are you judgmental? Judgmental is, they're giving me this feedback. You're telling stories to yourself. He's telling me this because he doesn't think I'm a good coach. My wife is telling me this because, and she's trying to be controlling and trying to, she's trying to ... And no, just accept things for, even better than accept things. Be curious about them. Okay, what does this mean? How can I use this?
Yep. And for me, the curiosity has always served me well in talking about or thinking about insecurities. When you ask, where did this come from? Where did this fear of whatever feedback come from? Where did my lack of humility come from? And really, really root it, really figure out, to Lencioni's point, it probably happened when you were a kid. Why? What happened? And to your point, what stories am I still telling myself that are keeping me from where I say I want to go?
Yeah. I think there's value in that explorative process of why and where does this come from. I've also heard other people that have been to therapy sessions, and that's what the therapists are all about, is like, let's figure it out. Let's figure it out. Figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, the story is this girl goes, listen, I think it was from Phil Stutz. That's where it came from. And that's why he created the tools. Because he's like, people would come in and they've been to all these different therapists and they'd be like, okay, like, tell me about your dad. Tell me what you want. And he's like, they're like, I know I have these issues because of my mom. Now I don't, it's not a matter of what, it's a matter of like, now how do I get better? And nobody had the tools to help move forward. And that's why he created all of these tools. So it's a worthwhile because it gives you a lot of context to the whys behind things. At some point, though, we need to just kind of like start moving the needle forward as well. And
totally.
I mean, we might not, because we might not be able to figure these things out. It might have happened in the type of thing where you blocked it out. It might have been before your memory. Like there's a lot of things that I can't figure out why there's a lot of things that why I'm messed up, but I can, but I can also work on them without knowing the why.
Yeah, super interesting. And I think about one of the frameworks we talk about a lot, which is awareness, intention, and action. A lot of what I meant was like just bring it as much awareness to what's going on as possible. But to your point, and to the point we always make with this, is like you can't stop there. Awareness is stop one on the train. Ultimately, you've got to point yourself in a direction, and then you've got to take action. And sometimes the awareness can be microscopic, but at least it's enough to say, okay, now what am I going to do as a result of recognizing that? And I think that's really important.
Love that. That's where just like when I get feedback. I get tons of feedback. I own a couple of businesses, manage a couple of teams, and I really encourage my teams to give me feedback. And I've gotten feedback from like, you're a bad leader, to like, you should have handled the situation different, to when you talk to the classes, you should try to do it this way. So like, there's like a lot. And every time there's this voice in my head going like, I hate this. And then, but you go like, oh, that's what I'm able to do now is go, that's so weird. Why does that voice say that? And like, that's so like, that's the awareness. Like, don't hate this. This is, you got to know that this is the thing. But because here's what I mean by like, when we try to root it, part of this is just built into our biology. Yeah. It's just like, we grew up in tribes of 150 people. If people didn't think you were a worthy contributor to the tribe, you were kicked out, and that's built into us. Like, it's just like when a giraffe is born, it pops up and it can walk within seconds, right? It's just built into them. Built into us is if people
don't get kicked out of the tribe.
Don't get kicked out of the tribe. Don't get kicked out of the tribe. That really is it. Don't get kicked out of the tribe. If somebody says, hey, you need to work on this, we hear like, oh no. Like, do they not like me? Do they not think I'm valuable? Do they not think I'm good at this? Am I getting kicked out of the tribe? Mm-hmm. And we just gotta override it. It's just really, you just got to override that. Yeah.
Agreed. Wrapping this bullet point up, I just want to bring one more quote in because it relates to what we just talked about and to the selfishness or the opposite of HHS being or being selfishness, which is, he writes this, by intentionally forcing yourself or themselves to compliment others, admit their mistakes and weaknesses, and take an interest in colleagues, employees can begin to experience the liberation of humility. This happens because they suddenly realize that focusing on others does not detract from their own happiness, but rather adds to it. And what I think about there is like so much insecurity is us turning our attention back on ourselves, how I feel in this situation, how they think of me, giving me that feedback, how other people are perceiving of me. And again, when you flip that around, when you are less selfish and you focus more on curiosity and more on humility, what you're doing is you're turning your own gaze away from yourself and onto others, which is what makes us feel good, and makes us effective teammates and makes us, the virtuous humans that we want to be. Nobody ever said, wow, what a great person. He's so selfish. Nobody ever says that, right? Hey, thanks so much. Thanks so much for tuning into the episode. Just one more reminder, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation, the remainder of it, we talk about something called healthy hunger. How do we make sure we're balancing hunger with health, really, with our ability to continue to work hard without overwhelm, without overwork, without burnout. Head to www.chasingexcellence.email, sign up for a premium membership. You will get it there. Again, ad-free episodes, additional content, additional conversation, fun things, challenges, stuff we're doing over there. Check it out. We'd love to have you there. We thank you in advance. And we, of course, thank you for listening to the episode this here week. Ben and I will be back next week for a brand new episode of Chasing Excellence.